you had a wonderful event at Face in the Book the other day. It was really, really well attended. For those folks who couldn't make it up there, I mean, it was standing room only. And I mean, it just shows what people think of Claire's work and her writing and this series. And I mentioned then that Dangerous Consequences, I think, is my favorite of the series so far. So I think it's a really good one. So if you haven't picked it up, I hope what you hear tonight will help you make that decision and grab a copy. But Dangerous Consequences involves one of the most sinister, scary things known to man. And I looked for the jacket copy, and I could not find a trigger warning anywhere. So it involves the scariest thing ever, and that's the timeshare sales pitch. So how did you come up with timeshares as kind of a central theme in Dangerous Consequences?
That is a very good question. And I have actually, and I have an answer for that. A lot of times, when people ask about where'd you get the idea, it's a lot harder to define, but this one, it all started with a cowboy, actually. I was selling my first book. The first Tank book had just come out. And so I was doing some book signings in Missouri and in the Ozarks, where the books are set. And I was in the local Books A Million in Branson. And I had my table. They'd set me up, with a big stack, and people could come up and chat and get something signed. And I was sitting there, and a cowboy walks into the bookstore, along with a prairie woman and, the long skirt and the blouse, the whole deal. And they start wandering around. Nobody batted an eye, because it was Branson, and, people walk around in all sorts of costumes all the time, because there's so many theater shows in the city that, just even going to and from work, all of these folks who work in the theaters are in costume. And so the prairie woman had something she wanted, and so she went off to find that. And the cowboy wandered over, and we started talking. And it turned out that he was a musician for a breakfast show. And so he did 4 or 5 shows a week in the house band of a breakfast show. And that wasn't surprising, because there are tons of breakfast shows in Branson, because the demographic that it draws are people who are very much early to bed, early to rise, right? They're retirees, and they are all about, getting up early and go see a show, have breakfast. It's perfect. But then he said something that did surprise me. And he goes, most of what we do is timeshares. And I looked at him and said, what, how do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, it's their timeshare sales pitches. You get the discount tickets, and part of what the whole thing are these timeshare presentations. And I had always thought of a timeshare presentation as, you get the thing in the mail, and if you're willing to agree to an hour-long presentation, you get the free weekend at the resort, right? I'd never thought that that could vary in any way. But, here was this cowboy telling me that, it did vary. And so I filed that away. I was like, that is just fascinating to me. And so I put it in my memory bank and left it there. And when it came time for this book, and I needed an idea, and I needed a plot, I started rolling that around again, and that conversation that I'd had with him. And I started thinking, okay, so how could I work with this? Because clearly it's a very Branson specific thing, which was great, because I I love my setting. I like that it's kind of, it's unique, and this fit perfectly in that goal that I always have. And so I started doing some more research, and it turns out that there had been tons of complaints to the Missouri Better Business Bureau about high pressure timeshare sales pitches. And guess where the timeshare industry was centered in the state of Missouri? Yeah, Branson. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm solid. This is a solid idea, and it would support, you know, an entire book.
I never knew that Branson had that kind of a draw for the theater business and the timeshares. I mean, it makes sense when you describe it that way, with the retirees and the tourists and that kind of thing. But yeah, I thought it made a good underpinning for the book. What else can you tell us about Dangerous Consequences?
Oh, let's see. Well, the other there's the timeshare element of it, and it does rapidly get very dangerous for some of the people involved. But the other part of the book is also very, very significant, because it involves the rest of the sheriff's department and staffing problems that have been going on for several books now. There are some deputies who don't like Hank. He's the new guy. He was appointed sheriff against their wishes, and now he's the boss, and they've been trying to undermine him, and things have been going from bad to worse. And you know, more insubordination and outright sabotage and those kinds of things. And so one of my characters, especially the deputy chief, Sheila, has to deal with that element of things, and, you know, try to keep a lid on this revolt that's going on. And those are really the two prongs of the book.
Now, Hank came in as a new sheriff, brand new in Branson Beauty.
Mm-hmm.
So how has his character changed over the course of 5 books?
No, that's a good question. He's gotten more comfortable, definitely, in 2 ways. One, just in Branson itself, because he wasn't from there, so everything was new, and all the power players were new, and that kind of thing. And so he, at this point in book 5, he has a better lay of the land as far as the politics goes, and those kinds of things. So he's definitely grown in that way. And I think he is more comfortable with himself as a leader. He had always been a police officer and a detective, so he was very comfortable in those roles, but he hadn't been, you know, he hadn't commanded anybody. He hadn't been in charge of a department or a budget or, you know, any of those things that suddenly he was thrust into in the first book, in the Branson Beauty. And he has slowly become more comfortable in that role as well. There have been some setbacks. A couple of the other books had some setbacks for him. So I think he's also scarred due to those. And, you know, some of how he was treated and how other people, you know, victims of crimes were treated in those crimes. And so I wouldn't say he's more jaded, but I think he is more, like, there's some built up scar tissue for him.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, that's a good way to describe it. Now, the setting is, I mean, it's great. You really capture that small town vibe with what's going on there. But I think what kind of shines through are really memorable characters.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, even some of the secondary characters that kind of just brush through, they stand out, and they're really well developed. how do you go about creating characters like Hank and Sheila and Sam and some of the other folks that you have in there?
Uh, oh gosh, that that is it's a that's a tough one. Sometimes they just come, um, like Duncan McCleary, who is Hank's father-in-law, who moved in with them when they moved down to Branson because he's getting kind of elderly and his wife had just died. He popped into my head fully formed.
Mm.
His name, his personality, his description, like everything was just there. Boom. Other ones are more of a work in progress, like that take more of my wheels turning and like consciously thinking about, where do I want this one to go, or how do I make this one more interesting or more sinister or more, that kind of thing. I'm trying to think.
Do you keep a, I mean, for five book series so far, with more to come, do you keep a Bible to help you kind of keep track of what your characters have done and their experiences and that kind of thing, or is it all tucked away up in your head?
Oh, no. No. That's a sieve. That's not a good idea. Um, I don't think I'm probably as organized as you are, because I know you use Scrivener, right?
I do, yeah.
Which I keep swearing to myself that I'm going to start, and I haven't yet. I have my little super high-tech index cards.
Uh-huh.
So every character has an index card, and they're color coded. So if you're yellow, that means you're a regular. Pink, you're a guest star, right? And so that, I keep track. They got blue eyes, and the hair, and the dead mom, or the whatever, those kinds of details.
Yeah.
And I also, like, I think I'm pretty good at knowing what I don't remember. So I will tag that as I'm writing. Like when I was writing this book, I do some callbacks to previous books with either descriptions or facts. And I have a little notation for that. And so I don't stop then to go look it up in a previous book, but I'll put that little asterisk like thing that and then I search and find at the end, and I just have this whole list, and it's like, okay, I need to go look up the last name of Kelly, the girlfriend in book one, and I need to go, do this and this and this, and then it's super fast because it's just, that's all I'm doing that day is just, going through and just plucking those little things. Because I don't, the broad sweeps and my big characters definitely. And then there are some that I just really like. For this book, there's one who I had no intention of bringing back. He had been in one of the ones a few books ago, and he was a fairly significant character. And, I was like, okay, he was good. He really served his purpose in this book. And I sat down and I was writing Dangerous Consequences, and he showed up. And he just showed up in the conference room and he never left. He was in it for the whole rest of the book.
That's great.
I have no way to explain that, but it just that he did. He walked in and he was like, no, I can assist with this and I'm not going to leave. And so, which is, I don't know if that happens to anybody else, but I always enjoy that.
Yeah. Yeah. That sudden appearance, you bet. Now you mentioned index cards and I've got mine.
You made me feel better. Thank you.
Well, yeah, you're probably much better at them than I am. Do you use them to kind of like Scrivener to basically lay out your story with, acts and scenes and that kind of thing that some folks do?
Well, I do use them for scene ideas. And so I'll scribble the scene idea on an index card. Those ones are white, by the way, in my high-tech color coding. And then I'll shuffle them or I'll stack them, like, oh, okay, I'll put scene X here and then scene Y will go and you kind of move them around in real life, in the physical world while you're moving them around, mentally as well.
Right.
I have found that for keeping me on the 3-act structure, I use a W. And let me see. Oh, okay. Let's see if this even shows up. And this I found on a blog once from Jordan Dane, who's a thriller writer. And I guess just the way that my brain works, this works really well for me as a visual. So let's see if.
Yeah.
So then whatever word count I'm going for, like if it's 80,000, okay, at 20,000, I need to be here, 40,000 here. And so
yep.
Then it also helps me, keep track of my word count pacing as far as that goes.
Oh, that's good. That's very good.
So.
Yeah, I learned. I was talking to JT Ellison last year at Killer Nashville, and she was saying that she does something. It's called she gets index cards and writes out 40 scenes, just 40 scenes, and that's kind of how she starts the book.
Okay.
So I tried that, and so I wrote out my 40 scenes in my index cards, and when I went to go start writing that, I made it to card 1 before I had to change it. I ended up killing the person in cart. She just needed to die. I mean, that was kind of the story. That's how it started.
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, but I like the W. That's kind of a cool little trick. I might have to steal that. That's pretty neat.
Oh, please do. Yeah, it like I said, I don't know if it's just how I process, the visual information. Like I've seen that where it's more of a just a straight line, and that doesn't do me any good. I'm like, I need more
stuff going on. Yeah,
more slopes. I know.
So I know you've mentioned it before. You did on Saturday when we met in person. But how did you originally select Branson in that Ozark setting for the location for this series?
Oh, well, so I grew up in Reno, so of course the natural thing is to set a series in Branson. No, I left Reno and I went to college at the University of Missouri, and that is in Columbia, which is in the middle of the state. So not really anywhere near Branson, but while I was there, I met a boy from Branson who is now my husband. And so that is how I became familiar with Branson in the first place. And, you know, at this point, I've been going down there, you know, 25, 30 years. And, you know, obviously I don't know it like a native, but, you know, getting to know it fairly well. And I just, you know, when I started thinking about switching to fiction and where would I set something and what would I write about? And it's like, oh, Branson might be good because it's got, for a writer's purposes, it's got everything you need. It's got a small town. So you've got all of those great things where, you know, you can have reoccurring characters and you can have kind of that backbiting politics that you get in rural communities. But they get 8 million tourists a year. So they also need the big city infrastructure and roads and tax base and all of these things that I could take my pick of, like big city problems too. And, you know, it's like, where else could I have my cake and eat it too? So.
That's true. Yeah, until we started talking about Branson, I didn't realize that there's that heavy of a tourist flow coming through there, but that's lots of stories coming your way. Yeah. Now, similarly, the television show Ozark has gotten a tremendous amount of buzz for its kind of dark portrayal of rural crime. How does Hank Worth's world compare to the television show Ozark? Other than Jason Bateman turned you down, I'm sure, for this role.
We didn't get our offer and soon. No, I did pipe dream on my part, but yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways it's very, very similar. You know, there is that grinding poverty and just the people who just do not give a shit. You know, living out in the woods. I would say I don't go quite as dark because, or at least in that kind of a rural way, or, you know, your
right
mountain Ozark way, because there is the big city tourist element. So even if you've got crime, it's like the bright lights, you know, theater, acting, music, crime, as opposed to the grinding poverty, you know, rural, shotgun toting crime.
Right.
The second book was very much like that. It had a family feud and it was set in the backwoods, and that was a lot of fun. Not for some of my characters, but for me, it was a lot of fun. But then the third one was set more in the music industry. So I feel lucky that I get to jump around a little bit more than, say, Ozark does, which is definitely not a criticism. It's an amazing show, and which I think would be highly diluted if it, you know, incorporated, you know, glitzy showbiz elements into it. But I would say that mine, it does not go quite as deep and dark as the TV show, certainly.
Yeah. No, but it does the location and the characters justice, though. I mean, to me, the Hank Worth series is almost like Longmire meets Ozark. It's kind of that middle road, not as dark, but I mean, Longmire, if you're familiar with that show, has a lot of that kind of
Can I quote you
dry.
for the next blur?
You sure you could, but no, it hits me
Thank
that
you.
way. So yeah, it's a good mix. It's a good mix. It works very well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Now we're starting to get some questions in the chat, but we'll plow
excellent.
through here till they kick us off. Your books tend to lead off, or at least most of them lead off with a big event like a showboat crash in Branson Beauty. How do you come up with those kind of kickoff events that kind of put everything into motion?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think it took me a couple books in to realize, like, hey, I've done this every time. And that, yeah, the showboat crash was actually completely based on a real thing, because there is a real showboat on the lake right outside Branson, and it really did run aground in the middle of the winter. And that was me staring at the TV news, saying, huh, what if they found a body? And then I was off and running. The second book was a little bit like my cowboy, for Dangerous Consequences, because years and years and years ago, we have a good friend that we went to college with, who is now a conservation agent with the state of Missouri. So he's a sworn police officer, or sworn peace officer. But he deals with, poachers and wildlife trafficking and environmental crime and all sorts of fascinating things like that. And they came out here to California to visit a bunch of people once, and were staying with us. And he's telling stories, and he tells a story about this ring of thieves who strip bark off trees. And I was like, what the heck? Okay. And so I filed that away, and years later that, became the inciting event for that book. So yeah, I definitely do that. And I don't know if, I'm sure part of it maybe has to do with that I used to be a reporter, that I like that it is kind of like, a story or a news event, and how I think. So it's like, okay, well, it starts with a news event, and then you cover the aftermath, right? The book is the aftermath. So I'm sure that maybe plays into why I like doing that so much.
And that was kind of a question I was going to lead into. I mean, before I read Another Man's Ground, I didn't know that stripping bark for the medicinal properties of the bark was even a thing.
Oh,
so
I didn't either.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, and we both sat there thinking he was pulling our leg when he's telling us about chasing this guy through the woods, because the farmer, or the man who owned the property, was just livid that they were killing his trees, because of course they don't care to do it properly, right? They and yeah, so it's also, it's been fun because I've learned lots with some of those books, with some of the books, because yeah, I didn't know anything about that either.
Huh, that's interesting.
I put as business expenses quite a few boxes of tea, elm bark tea, and things like that, to see what I should be writing about.
Geez. Now, you mentioned that your prior life as a journalist may have some influence on how you write. Do you think that background has really helped you as a crime fiction author?
I definitely. I definitely think it has. If for nothing else, because like I came in with a baseline knowledge. I had covered police and trials and courts for so long that like I already knew what the process was and how the system worked, and I met a whole lot of people in those lines of work, you know, to kind of be able to composite people and put together characters and that kind of thing. So I would say that has been invaluable. Definitely, just with helping with the ease of some of what I write, that there was definitely not a learning curve like there would have been.
I would think though too that just from that experience, you also you know how to push through and write because you've got to write. And I think a lot of newer authors, aspiring authors, struggle with that. They get that writer's block, but you know how to push through that because you had to as a journalist.
There is nothing more motivating than an editor standing 2 feet away saying, right now.
Yep.
I need it right now.
I love it. What's next for Hank?
Oh,
Now you were a little reluctant to give any hints the other night at Facing a Book, but can you give us just a little bit?
oh, what? Let's see, what could I say? Well, there will be another inciting event.
Good to know.
And it will likely, it'll be a big deal for the town, and then it'll be a big deal for Hank's circle as well.
Okay.
His family and his colleagues, and on a different plane. So there'll be the crime aspect of it, and then some different ramifications.
Gotcha. Now, Sarah mentioned early on in the introduction, you've written nonfiction, true crime. Have you thought about going back to that genre again, or are you having too much fun writing Hank's adventures?
Probably right now, I think I'm having too much fun. I can definitely see myself going back. It would need to be the right topic, I think.
I can see that. Because you have to live with that for a long, I mean, that's a long process.
Yeah, it definitely is. And so, you know, when with the true crime that I did, I had covered it as a reporter, so I knew what the story was, and I knew who all of the players were in it. But there was still a bit of, not quite realizing how long it was going to take and how much it was going to take out of me.
Right.
I mean that in a bad way at all, just that, you're, instead of dealing with, little voices in your head that are your characters, you're relating with people who really have, honest to God, lost someone to a murderer,
Right.
And so I think it would need to definitely be like the right kind of topic.
Gotcha. No, I understand that. One last question before we turn it back to Sarah and Jennifer for questions in the chat is, what advice can you give for aspiring writers out there who are just getting ready? Maybe they've got a manuscript they think is done. What advice would you give to them?
Well, first, congratulations, because that's huge. If that's the point you're at, give yourself a pat on the back, because that's an enormous accomplishment, definitely. And let's see. Well, I guess, and I'm sure you've said this too, Jim, that like to put it aside, because there's not, there's nothing probably that can't wait a month, and just put it in a drawer and let it sit, and your brain is going to keep working on it.
Mhm.
And your subconscious and all of those things, and after that month, or whatever time period you've brokered with yourself to keep it in that drawer, then you take it out and read the whole thing start to finish, and take a good look at where that is, and you'll see things both ways. I think you'll see things where you're like, oh yeah, this sags here a little, I need to plump up this character, or on the flip side you'd be like, wow, that is really good, I really like that part, I really nailed that, and so I think that is important, to just to let it breathe for a bit, and then find people who are going to be honest and kind. And I think they have to be both. And they don't have to be rating it for everything. You could ask them to read it for everything, and please tell me if you get to a part that just doesn't make any sense to you, say. But like I have a very good friend of mine has read every Hank book, and he is in his late 70s, and he was born and raised in Branson, and he's an encyclopedia, and so he reads it for me for that, and he's not shy about being like, I didn't follow why this character ended up in this place. Right. He'll tell me those kinds of things too, but his expertise is the Branson, and so I'm lucky that I get his feedback on that, and then I have a law enforcement friend who reads it, and she's not going to be able to tell me anything about Branson, but she sure can tell me, no, that is not what we do.
Right.
When we bring them into the jail, or so if you are able to find people, you don't have to find one perfect reader. If you find several who are perfect for that sliver, then you're in really good shape.
Yep. That's great advice. Great advice. Claire, thanks for spending some time with us, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah and Jennifer. And again, this is a great book, folks. You need to go out and get it, find it, get it, read it. I won't even say what you wrote in my daughter's copy. I'll just leave that between you and I, and we'll deal with that later.
I do like your daughter very much.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you so much, Jim. This was a lot of fun.
Good. Back to you, Sarah.
I was just typing it. I was just going to say, everyone can go ahead and turn their cameras on so we can see everybody's faces. And then, yeah, I'm going to start with one since I have the floor, and then I'll let Jennifer, either she can read some off or she can ask people to say theirs. But no, I was wondering, with the W that you showed, are you able to do that in your first draft, or do you do that like after you just kind of let your first draft come out and then see how it all fits in and move it around?
So here, I'll hold it up one more time. Ignore my Post-it notes.
Mhm.
So I don't outline. And so the one thing that I guess I am really nitpicky about is my word count. And so I am constantly keeping an eye on that. And so let's say it's 80,000 words. So 20,000, I need the end of the first act here. And so when I hit between 10 and 15,000 words, I'm like, okay, where's my point of no return? And then, you know, that's what I am working toward at that point. So
it's as you approach
I
those that
might
you
not
kind of,
know
yeah.
what is going to happen here
Mhm.
because I don't outline. And I certainly don't know what's going to happen here. So I don't know, does that?
Yeah, so you're kind of looking at it as you're going with your word count and going, okay, I got to come to something soon kind of thing. And then kind of go
Right.
off on your tangent and then, oh, now I've got to get to this. And okay, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And is that something you can find online? That through?
Yeah, and I have a cleaner copy on my computer. I can either, I don't know if there's a way to email everybody who registered.
Yeah, no, if you send it to me, I can send it out to everybody who registered.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of people are asking about it.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, there's somebody else I know who does like a notebooks where she does that. She has to do 4 notebooks that are certain page numbers, and she kind of, I think, knows a similar thing. She gets to an end of that notebook and she knows that's the end of her, but she writes by hand, and I could not do that.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so like filling up
you're
that
writing
much.
by hand, you're not going to count your words.
Yeah, but I can't imagine. Yeah, Jennifer, did you have some?
Yeah, so Andrea, I'm going to group these two together. It's from Andrea and Rick. And Andrea was asking, how have the people of the Branson area accepted your writing about their area? And Rick wanted to know if any of the characters throw rolls at Lambert's Cafe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Repeat Rick's again.
He wants to know if any characters throw rolls at Lambert's Cafe.
Rick and I have some shared experiences, Missouri experiences. I'll answer that one first. So there's and it's huge. It's right off the freeway, right, Rick?
Yep.
The cafe.
Yep.
And they're famous for their throwed rolls, and literally, they're not kidding. Like the waiters chuck the rolls at you. In this place, and you know, they're the big fluffy muffin type top rolls. I have not used that in a book yet, Rick. I will spend the rest of the night contemplating that.
There's a crime.
What could you bake in one of those that would hurt somebody? Huh?
Knock somebody out.
Oh, you might have just made the whole rest of my night. I'm very excited about this now. But yes, it's a great fun place to visit if you're ever down in between Springfield and Branson. So now back to, what do the people who live in Branson think? The ones who are readers, I think, enjoy it. I think there probably aren't as many readers as maybe there are in some other places. The 4th book, part of it takes place up in Columbia, where the university is. And I know folks up there got a big kick out of that. And so that was fun for me. I got, some feedback that people really, really enjoyed that. Part of it being set up in that city too. So, so far I haven't gotten any truly irate emails. The usual irateness is saved for, what they think is bad grammar or so nothing to do with Branson. So
I bet the tourists would really like the book. So the people in the timeshares, because they're visiting, they want to read about the places they're seeing.
yeah, that's true. Although I don't know if a timeshare would
Read the book.
want to stock it in their building or their condos after how uncharitable I am to some extent.
In the hotels, put it in the hotels.
Yeah.
Yes, there you go. The hotels don't kill anybody in this.
And then someone was asking if you work with a critique group or other early readers.
I do not. And that is just a purely personal thing for me. I have tons of friends who do, and they swear by it and they just love it. I just am not one of those people. Nobody sees it until it's done. Not my husband, not my agent, like nobody.
Like first draft done or done?
Done.
Wow.
And then that's when it goes out to those beta readers I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I get their feedback, and then it goes to my agent and my editor. So that's what has ended up working for me. But as I said, and tons of folks love their critique groups, and they work really well.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is the rewrite process for you?
I am a very slow writer. So I tend to not do very much rewriting. It might take me 9 months to do a first draft, but then, I'm basically done. I mean, I say that, but it's I go back, but I don't have to substantially rewrite anything. When I hit about halfway, I will stop and I will go back and I will read the whole thing from the beginning. And that will let me adjust my pacing at that point if I need to. Like, this is feeling off, and my first act turn isn't quite in the right spot, and I'll adjust that then before I get any further along. And then I do that again at about the end of the second act, and I'll stop and I'll go back and I'll read everything I've got done so far. So I guess if you want to count those as that is a draft and a draft, then I certainly do that. And when I'm done, I'll go back, I'll let it sit. And, sometimes it's due to the editor, so that makes some adjustments on how long it can sit in the drawer. But you go back, you read the whole thing, and there's tinkering, or there's, I didn't realize I hadn't pruned this, branch of the plot that didn't go anywhere, right? So I am definitely doing that kind of thing. It's so there is the process, but I don't go back, and I think because I am so slow, like that when the chapter's done, it's done. It's like I've already spent 15 minutes on that word choice.
And did you figure that out with your?
Or just like when you're choosing to do that, if you choose to do that, you know, 2 or 3 drafts down the line, or at first, and either way is right, but just that's kind of my process on how I do that.
Did you know that right away, or did it take a book or two to figure out what your process was? Or you just kind of did it?
I've always been slow. So,
Careful. Call it careful.
yes,
Thoughtful.
I like that. Yes,
Thoughtful.
deliberate, right? I'm deliberate. Yeah, and so I guess that has always been my process. Like I can't. I'm not physically capable of dashing it out. You know, like these like, I don't know, like Usain Bolts who are, I wrote 4,000 words today. I'm like, oh my God, what drugs were you? I like that's amazing to me to have that kind of word count in a day. I couldn't do it. It's, you know, it's a, you know, I shoot for 1,000. And if I hit that, I'm very happy. And it's 1,000 that's mostly gonna make it in the final.
I wonder if that's a journalism thing too, though, because that's kind of how I write. Because, you know, we don't have a chance to go back the next day and change a word. You know, it's already published. So,
Oh, that's a good point. I had not
Yeah.
thought that in connection with with the, you know, not going back, or, you know, the reporting and then not going back. Oh, that's a really good point, Jen. I think you might be right, because yeah, it's like it's out there.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
No tinkering as your editor is.
Yeah.
So yeah, very good.
Okay, so this question was mine. When you decided to write fiction, how did you come up with a main character? How did you come up with Hank Worth, who's a sheriff in a small town?
So I had decided on Branson, and I thought, well, I don't want to make him someone who was born and raised there, because that means that I'm going to need to know more. So that was a little bit self-preservation, because I am an outsider. And so I thought, well, if I'm writing an outsider, like I'm not going to have quite the pressure of, well, you're writing this guy who's been sheriff for 50 years, and how would he not know, you know, XYZ about Branson? But if I brought in somebody brand new, he could learn the ropes along with me, if that makes sense. So that's why I decided to have him come in from the outside, but have that little bit of an in, because his wife is from there. So, you know, he, I guess, kind of married into the town, so to speak. So he does have that entree, even if, you know, he himself isn't. And I also wanted him to be younger. He's in his, you know, he's probably 36, 37 years old. And I wanted them to have little kids. Because to me, that felt different. More different than having, grown kids or teenagers or no kids. I was like, well, if they have like little kids, and so then you would have little kid problems. Sure, there was no relationship at all to the fact that I myself had small children at the time. And so to me, I thought that I'm like, okay, so that to me made him, for me, more interesting. Giving him that characteristic and that family as well. So those were kind of those were conscious decisions as far as he went. Like his personality just kind of came though. I did not start out intending for him to be quite so funny. And not like, I'm a comedian funny, but, more just like, just kind of dry, which was not, I didn't sit down saying, okay, this is my goal. He just kind of developed that way. Once I had all those other things in place, like his age and his family circumstance and those kinds of things.
And the male, did you always know you wanted to write a guy?
Well, so the other thing was I didn't want to write me. I was not under any circumstances at the point when I started this series, like I was not going to write a, female newspaper reporter character. I was like, I am that. I don't want to pretend to be that too, like I didn't. And so that was about as far the other direction as I could get. A male cop.
Love it. I love it.
So yeah, that was the whole reason. I was like, I'm stuck in this life. I don't want to be stuck.
That's what fantasy is for. Oh my gosh, I love that. Do you have one?
Yeah, I have a couple more questions. As an author, you are pretty out there in terms of your publicity. Have you ever had a scary fan or stalker who made you nervous?
No, but I do. I try to be careful. Just because you never know, what people are thinking, especially, on the other side of a computer screen. But no, so far I've been lucky and I haven't had anything that's really been too worrying. I do think, and one of the great things about this community is, well, one, I think we're all aware of those things or in tune enough where if you're at any kind of event and you sense something going, that I would know, if one of you were there, you would stick around or, hey, walk with me to my car, or, like that we have such a great community that would just be second nature, I think, to all of us. If anybody felt unsettled by a particular person or, anything like that, at a conference or at an event, that people are going to come, either dilute the waters, the enough people around, or walking with somebody, or, hey, you had said they were going to come grab a coffee with me, and you take them off. So I have absolute faith in our community too, that people look out for each other.
I hear it's the romance writers you have to worry about.
Oh my gosh. I know. That still boggles my mind. It's like, oh, never turn your back on one of those guys, I guess.
No. And then Marie wanted to know, if you were ever to do a spin-off series, which character would it be centered around and why?
Oh, that's a great question, Marie. Well, I guess it would probably be Sheila or Sam. And Sheila's his deputy chief, and then Sam is their primary, lower ranked deputy who helps them in the investigation. And I love both of them. They've ended up being two very different characters. She's a Black woman in her 50s, and he's a tall, gawky Ozark boy in his early 20s, but I think they would each hold potential to maybe do a spinoff if, I plunked them down in a different area or a different setting, maybe. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that at all. That's a really good question.
I have a Branson question too, if you don't, because I'm kind of considering the similar thing where it's a real place, but you're obviously putting these murders in there, and how do you deal with what's real and what's not, as far as setting it, and especially with law enforcement? Did you make up that there's the sheriff or the county, or how the structure of the law enforcement works there?
Yes, that's a really good question, because I did. So obviously Branson is a real city. The county that it is located in is actually called Taney County. And that I changed. So in my books, it is Branson County.
Okay.
And that was, one, at the advice of Susan Spann, who, if you know her, she a wonderful author who used to live here in Sacramento, who also is an attorney and very well versed in these things. And before my first book came out, we were talking, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you should definitely do that and change it." Okay. Because that was the law enforcement agency. It would be the county sheriff. And so I definitely had plans that not everybody in that sheriff's department was going to be good, right? Twists or those kinds of things. And so if I could say, 3 deputies of the Branson County Sheriff's Department were arrested on suspicion or, whatever, then I wasn't, it wasn't the real county. So it wasn't, even if it was like, oh no, it's the pretend Taney County Sheriff's Department. It was like, there was a
still sound like it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that was my one big change, was changing the name of the county, but it was for that reason. I think that's even more important the smaller your setting is. You can get away with a lot with the LAPD or the NYPD because they're so big. If you have one corrupt cop, there are thousands. But if you have one corrupt cop in a real town that has 20,
they're gonna think it's about them. Yeah.
that's a different story. Yeah. So